So, hey everybody, welcome to the Awkwardly Big Dice podcast, episode number 4 now. Um, Celebrations, yay! Um, this week we've got a few topics to talk about as usual, going for the similar sort of runtime as last week, as long as that's okay with my co-host. Of
I
about
mean,
an hour and a half. But introduce myself again, as I do every week. I am Dan, the host, and my co-host with me, as always, is Rob. Big waves. Big waves.
no,
So we've got a few things, as I said, we're going to talk about. Hopefully, get to the topic that we have been putting off for every week so far. So for a month, basically.
we'll get
Um,
there.
hopefully we'll talk about it this time, and we'll be covering our usual topics as well, like spells and monsters. I have looked at some of the news for D&D. I know there is new like Unearthed Arcana out, and there's all this stuff that they're playtesting. I just haven't read it. I'll be honest. I've been busy doing other things.
Well, you're still a step ahead of me because I didn't even know there was any new stuff out.
I know they've got a new there's a new adventure coming out with there's like another Fandelver thing. It looks like it's almost a
So,
um I can't remember what it's called, but they've got the new campaign adventure coming out. Looks like it's something to do with mind flayers, but mind flayers are pretty big now, so it makes sense for them to do that. Um, but yes, I haven't looked at the Unearthed Arcana because I've been preparing for my own D&D campaign, putting stuff together
obviously.
for that, and doing things for our YouTube channel, put together shorts, and I've been playing Baldur's Gate 3, of course, as all D&D fans I'm sure are currently, or at least a good portion of them are.
I'm at 100 hours now.
Nice, nice, nice. I think in total, if you add all my hours up, I'm at 70 something. But because I started again, I won't. I'm at. I don't know. Oh, I don't. Must be more than that now. I was at something like 17, but like I'll be more than that now.
Yeah, fair. Fair, fair, fair.
But I've been doing that's because I've been doing things a little different this time. But we won't talk about Baldur's Gate 3. We've talked about it before. We'll cover it more once we have played both. Hopefully, played it through. At least one of us has played it through, and the other one can still have some sort of input. But we'll start off with our our topic of the week, which is spells of the week. Be the first one we'll start with, and I feel like we should roll dice or something to decide who goes first because I always just like throw it on you to go first. Um, but I don't have
I've
any
got dice
dice.
right here if
Even
you
though this is
want.
where I play D&D, I don't have any dice next to me um, to be able to have like rollies or something. But it is definitely a plan we should do for next week.
Yeah.
Um, but we'll start with the one that's in front of my screen. It's the first one I have loaded up, which is yours. So you'd like to introduce to our audience what your spell of the week is.
Yes, so my spell of the week this week is I've gone a lower level spell this time. It's only second level, which means you can have access to it from character level 3 onwards, if you are the correct class to get it. And it's what I would call a utility spell because it's very impactful, but not really in combat. It's not a combat spell. So one of my favorite spells is Pass Without Trace. Now we have a lot of instances in D&D. In every campaign I've ever played in, there's been plenty of times where the player whole group, the player characters, have all wanted to sneak somewhere. Sometimes more than others. Sometimes there are chapters in a campaign where it might be more prevalent to sneak around a lot rather than just doing it the old-fashioned murder hobo way and going in guns blazing. But what this spell will do, it is a concentration spell. It's a single action to cast, and it lasts for a full hour. So that's plenty of time. It's not like a concentration spell for combat that lasts you just 1 minute or 10 minutes. It's a nice long spell, and it will give everybody in your party that is within 30 feet of you, assuming you're the person that has cast the spell, a plus 10 bonus to dexterity stealth checks. Your party also cannot be tracked except by magical means, which there are a few ways to do, like Hunter's Mark or more like scrying type spells. And a creature receives that bonus, leaves behind no tracks or other traces of its passage. So no footprints in the snow or the sand or the mud or whatever you want to traverse. There will be no evidence that you were even there. So it's a fantastic spell because what you tend to find in a group is there's typically one person that will wear heavy armor.
Yes.
At least one.
At least one, yes. At least
Yeah.
one. And we
I
need those
always
players too. We don't talk down to those players. We need those characters too.
Yeah, plate characters are welcome at any party. Nice full plate, 18 AC, 20 with a shield. We like that. Hard to hit, hard to take down, very loud, walking around covered in pots and pans, as I always say. Sounding like someone rattling a bag of spanners, or there's so many
Carrying
different
pockets full of
ways
change.
to yeah. Yeah, the janitor with about 20 keys on a keyring. All the loud, jangly, metallic noises you can imagine, um, which puts you at a disadvantage on rolling stealth checks for that character. And if you're all sneaking as a group check, then that's going to make it a lower average total. It's going to mean that there's somebody letting the side down, so to say. In other words, they're just disadvantaged. This really helps cover that weakness. You'll typically find it'll help the players with disadvantage and probably a low dex as well, at least reach somewhat of a normal amount. And then it'll really help your stealthy characters, your dex characters,
Yes.
your rogues, your monks, your rangers, really reach astronomical numbers. I think the highest I've seen without trying to make a build to really maximize it is just like a sneaking rogue or something like that. Is someone receiving a result in the low 40s
Mm-hmm.
on almost a natural 20,
That would be about right,
and
yeah.
I've never seen a passive perception above that.
No, I don't think I've seen passive perception near that. You'd struggle to get an active perception check to even equal that. Yeah, it's not a spell realistically that's meant for your rogues, right? It's not meant for those guys or I suppose your monks, depending on the type of monk and the build. Um, it's really meant to help with group checks, group stealth checks, to cover that average and to hopefully help your chainmail be less jingly. I suppose is a way to look at it.
Yeah.
Um, it is obviously one that comes generally from your druids and your rangers, but I do think yeah, trickier domain clerics also do get it.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, they do. Your rangers will get it a little bit later because they get access to spells at a slower rate,
Hmm.
being a half caster. Um, but if you have a druid in the party, or like we've just said, there's a trickery domain cleric. They'll get it at level 3, which is nice and low.
Hmm.
It really, really helps. I have seen sometimes groups get a little bit too dependent on it. There are weaknesses still. If you have an enemy with detect thoughts, they can feel your minds anytime. Like the spell says, they can still be tracked with magical means, and there are
Hmm.
ways to do that.
Hmm.
But if you're just sneaking around guards, other such things, other creatures that might act as guards, not necessarily just humans in soldiers guarding things or anything like that, then it's really, really good. Sometimes you just have to be, I suppose, a little still apply common sense to it. It doesn't allow you to walk in plain sight right in front of somebody's
No,
face. I always would have ruled that they'd still see you if you stand in the middle
it's
of
not
the road
stealth.
in
It's
broad
not
daylight.
yeah, you're not going to
It's not
ask somebody to
invisibility.
do a stealth check if they're just walking casually down the street. No.
You still have to be sneaking. It's not invisibility, but it means that yeah, you can have a really easy time of it. And I think a really good example is going back to the end of your campaign down when we were in Nuri and we were approaching the so was it a town? I think it was really a town called Ashley.
Yes, it was
And
like a large village, small town. Yeah.
yeah, very large, open space, but
Hmm.
with lots of buildings and stuff to kind of move between and around. It had been overtaken by a small army of devils and cultists and various things. And if if our party would have walked in guns blazing, as the term often is, even though you don't typically have guns in D&D, walked in clear sight, ready to start a fight, we would have gotten obliterated.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
What type of devil was it that was flying around? Was it horned or was it?
We had a horn devil that flew around. There were imps that were kind of more localized or smaller area.
Imps felt like the
Scouts.
surveillance.
Yeah. And there were some spined devils as well that would do more long range
Yeah,
um, surveil like scouting.
and then I think in and about there was also some slightly higher stuff as well. Like there was a couple of chain devils here and there and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
there was a couple of chain devils. There was a bone devil somewhere. Again, they've got wings, I believe, bone devils, so they could fly.
Yeah,
But it was a horn devil was the main sort of
yeah.
bat-like winged entity that was flying over the town,
It was
imposing.
really good as well because we knew we were dependent on this spell, good sneaking. Vladimir Ayers Narakis would cast invisibility on myself, which we did comment on in another video where we were talking about how it's not something you typically expect your artificer to be the one that would be doing the scouting, but that was just simply the group dynamic.
Hmm.
Um, Pass Without Trace meant that we could actually have a bit of a covert operation, get in and around to the buildings that we needed to, have smaller, self-contained fights that weren't overwhelming,
Hmm.
um, and effectively disappear without a trace
Didn't.
once we had achieved our goal. Uh, pardon me, rescued people that we needed to rescue. Um, but the tension was still there. It
Hmm.
was really good for that. So it's yeah, definitely one of my favourite spells. But I imagine as a DM, it could also get quite vexing if the group relied on it too much, and I think the
I'd agree.
temptation would have been there to start putting in things to mitigate that
Yeah,
um,
yeah. There
in a
is.
non-vindictive way.
Yeah, I think if it gets excessive, you and I built it, and I knew how you guys were. We it was the end game, wasn't it, of the campaign? I knew generally how you guys operate. I knew that you were going to go in quietly. You're going to look to stay stealthily, so I built the entire thing kind of with that in mind. And obviously, you could have done it another way. I was never going to say, no, you can't do it another way, and I would have managed and would have improved and would have rolled. But I had planned it kind of with the idea that you would do that. But had it been, another point when it had becoming a bit excessive, yeah, I would have thrown in a number of divination spells to track you guys. But there was no need for it. Like it doesn't, and again, like it kind of you want the players to feel powerful, you want to feel successful,
Yeah,
and you want to feel like they are achieving something, and you're only going to ruin that by trying to counter their spells all the time, even with literal counter spells sometimes.
I
Though it's
think
quite fun.
yeah, countering mechanics is something that you have to do in the right way. Um, so do it with, don't just do it with enemies that you wouldn't expect to be able to do it or at the first opportunity. Like let I know it's kind of branching off into a bit more of DM advice, but let your players feel powerful for a while, um, and only allow those mechanics to be defeated or countered uh, when the situation has enough gravitas, like with Strahd, for example. Coming over
Yeah,
and getting someone to cast dispel on a certain thing or something along those lines.
I'd agree. I think. No, I do. But yes, Pass Without a Trace. I think even when I played a ranger, which was only for like what we did a two shot, one shot, wasn't it? One shot, wasn't it?
Shot, two shot,
Yeah,
some shot.
because kind of like the second part that you did like a part two, I played as a different character. My
You
vampire,
did,
oh,
yeah.
Dampier ranger. It was fun mechanically to play as, but even though I was like, probably not gonna need this, but it's always a good shout to take pass without a trace. Like I don't know what's coming. We might want to sneak. Um, did we even end up using it? I feel like when we win that like astral misty place, but I don't think we ended up like needing it.
You did use it.
Did I use
You
it then?
used it in
Was
the
it
world
there?
that was made of the acidic ooze. I'm
Yeah,
sure
I'm
you used
thinking
it
misty for some reason, but yes, you're right. It was all ooze, giant.
You had to tunnel through the acidic, like the entire
Yeah,
giant acidic ooze.
yeah, that's the place I'm thinking of. I'm just for the reason I'm seeing it in my head as misty, and I don't know why. Was that just the map? I don't remember. Um,
It was difficult to draw on a map because it was essentially a massive world of Jello.
yeah.
So
How how do you uh, how do you turn that into
I think I
a
did use
map?
the clouds and stuff on Incarnate, but made them purple and green and stuff.
Hmm.
But and then used some water textures as well. And
Yeah, that would have been
but
hard to do.
it was quite. It was. I think the picture worked, but
It
like
worked.
it
It
needed
worked.
explaining.
But yes, that's where I'm
Yeah.
thinking I might have used it, and I think you're right. I think I did. Great
Well,
spell.
you certainly got through that screen easily. So yeah, that was a good use of the spell. But yeah, I think that's us waffling about Pass Without a Trace, certainly enough. What's your spell of the week?
My spell of the week is well, it starts with a word that is a name that's hard to pronounce. So we're just going to go with what I think it's pronounced as, and that is Raulothim's Psychic Lance, or as I'm just going to call it for the sake of this podcast, Psychic Lance.
Yeah.
Uh, it is a spell that I have seen used a couple of times in the Curse of Strahd, and I liked the sound of it, and it seemed really cool. And I also like that it's available to a good number of different classes, including the Bard, the Sorcerer, the Warlock, and the Wizard.
It is.
Um, so all your arcane casters, basically. And it was very useful when we had to fight the BBEG, and our Bard could whip it out. And we know what Bards are like; they love to whip it out. Um,
They
but
do.
in this case, we're talking about Psychic Lance. To describe it, it's basically a spell that involves an intelligence saving throw, which is great because very few things have great intelligence. There are a few, if you're, maybe in the Curse of Strahd, there might be some individuals there that their intelligence is a big thing.
Yeah.
Um, but on a failed intelligence saving throw, the target, which has to be seen, though, if you don't see them but you know their name, and they're within the 120 foot range, and you know their
Yeah.
name, you don't actually need to see them. But if they fail the save, and you see them or they're in the range, they take a 7d6 psychic damage. Again, great psychic damage, like how rarely that is resisted. It makes it a great spell.
It's the second least resisted. I think
Yeah, I think
Force just tips
Force
it.
just tops it, I think, yeah. And then also really importantly with the effect of this spell is that if they failed the spell save, they are incapacitated until the start of your next turn.
Yeah.
On a
So
on a successful save, it's half damage and they're not incapacitated, but they're incapacitating your enemy, much like the monk's stunning strike, which stunning is not too different from incapacitated if we're being, honest about
not
it.
too different.
But it's a great thing because you're just taking them out of the initiative for a round.
I think incapacitated as a word doesn't necessarily cover. If you really want to be a rules lawyer,
Mm,
incapacitated is a bit of a strange condition. Um, just simply put, reading it rules as written on D&D Beyond, an incapacitated creature can't take actions or reactions.
no.
So I suppose the rules lawyer would say, does that mean they can take bonus actions and still move? or does that mean they can take legendary actions? I think in the end, I ended up probably buffing the condition a little bit and just saying they can't really do much of anything because it felt really like they should have been skewered to the ground by a giant psychic lance,
Hmm.
or somehow, if the lance wasn't physical, but somehow like have a you still have the sensation of your entire brain being penetrated by an extremely large, sharp object.
It would be
Uh,
curious to see the official. I don't know if Jeremy Croft has done an official response to Incapacitated in the past with
I don't know.
Sage
I've
Advice.
never looked on it.
I've never either. Because really, incapacitated sounds like you're taking someone out and they shouldn't really be able to move. But it doesn't say they can't
Yeah,
move. So
yeah,
technically, yeah, you. I would say maybe they stumble around, but if you're incapacitated by the the word itself,
mm,
then maybe they should just use a different word to describe that. Because if you compare it to what like stunned, stunned includes incapacitated, right? So if you are
yeah,
stunned, you are also incapacitated, and you can't move, and you can only speak falteringly.
yeah,
Um, so that does define like you cannot move, whereas incapacitate doesn't cover move. So technically, as you said, as a rules lawyer, you can move. I wouldn't say you take bonus action. I think action covers that.
yeah.
And
I would sweep it that way. Yeah,
there's, I mean, depending on your preference for how you phrase it, it could be called a move action as well. And you say, well, you can't move then, but most people don't. So, um, yeah.
however, it is still an insanely strong
Oh,
effect to apply to a single big target like a boss,
yes,
like Strahd, for example, or
yeah.
whoever else, whatever else large target, large boss target you might be fighting. Just make sure that they're not immune to those conditions.
Hmm.
And I think one of the things that I actually really like about this spell, so I've discussed psychic damage spells already before. I
Hmm.
think is it the first week where I said Synaptic Static was
Hmm.
probably my favorite spell. Um, that has a weakness that if you're trying to do it to something that essentially is too stupid and has too low of an intelligence, or isn't sentient enough, I suppose, is probably the real meaning behind
Hmm.
that. It just doesn't affect them.
Yeah.
Uh, Raulothim's Psychic Lance is not held back by
No,
that
it is
weakness.
not.
It does not have any ruling or statement that says it doesn't affect anything with X amount of intelligence or less. So you just straight doing a, a spell that is almost as powerful as a fireball, which is a pretty kind of baseline level of strong spell.
Yeah,
Because fireball is
so
8d6 damage.
it's the one that
This
people
is
use.
7d6. And it does buff if you upcast it, so you'll be doing more an extra d6 for every level you upcast it from as well, which I always like to see. Um, and obviously, if you incapacitate the single big bad guy that you're fighting against, everybody is going to kind of get a free turn against them. People that are on low health can move in and attack and move away without worry of a reaction at every attack, or um, people can go in and just start swinging, which is pretty much what happened against a certain end boss.
I was give a shout because our bard loved a spell I almost took this week. It was between the two. It's almost like I wanted to shout at our bard, our buddy Chris this week, but instead I went for the one he wasn't known for,
Mm,
and went for the one that he used to kind of win the day.
he did.
I mean, not that his go-to favorite of Shatter didn't win the day on a few occasions, or at least earn him a strong nickname, or
Duncan's Wolfsbane.
Duncan Wolfbane, aye.
We do love him,
Legend in Barovia. Um,
especially amongst the elderly ladies.
yes, so yeah, also a typical bar fashion was a ladies' man, but his was old ladies. Old ladies man. He had a refined taste, a refined palate. Did our bard. Um, but
Bless
I
him.
do. I. It's probably one of the reasons I quite like bards. Is a lot of their spells are kind of in that sort of psychic damage sort
Mm.
of school. Is that
It
a
definitely
damage
puts me in
effect
mind.
type? I don't know what you call it.
Yeah, damage type. I
Damage
think I
type.
would just
Yeah.
probably call it. Yeah, I think psychic damage is one of those where there's a few things you can kind of imagine doing it. Warlocks of a certain type,
Mhm.
Great Old One warlocks typically you see doing a lot of psychic stuff. Although any warlock can learn this spell,
Mhm.
it just feels a little bit more on theme for that particular
Yeah.
type of warlock. A Barren Mind sorcerers again, nice flavor, but any sorcerer can learn it.
Mhm.
Um, there isn't really any kind of psionic style wizards, is there?
No, not really. I definitely would have used it with Emmerich, and he was school divination. I think
Yeah,
it was something I considered. Did I have? Do we have fourth level? I think we did. Did we have fourth level when it
I
was? I
think
think
you
we did.
used it once.
But I don't think I ever used it because I think I knew that Chris had taken it with Duncan, his bard. So I was like, I will let him have Psychic Lance, and I will choose something else. I also wasn't. I like to choose divination spells
You did.
before anything else, and I like to keep things on theme, even my spells, even to the detriment of the entire party. I do like to make my
Full
spells
of cool.
have theme. Rule of cool, sure. And I also like, as we've said before, with wizards, you have so many spells, but a lot of spells are not combat based, or they're more outside combat utility spells, and I like to choose those as well because he was a private investigator, so lots of divination spells are useful for that.
May he rest in peace.
May he rest in peace after he had his skull smashed in with his own fake leg by a member of his own party under the charm of
Which we might
a
come
particular
to
bad guy.
later
We might come to later. It's a good
with a
point
certain topic. Yeah.
for that certain topic we get to, which therefore means we should move on to topic number 2 and move on to monster of the week.
Mm. Well, I went first with the spells, so I'll go first again with this. We'll leapfrog each other, as it were.
Nice.
A creature that I have had fun using. You'll probably notice a theme with me. I like creatures that have a good theme or narrative or lots and lots of lore, especially ones that you can manipulate as a DM and help to suit a situation. And for that reason, this week, my favourite monster is the Revenant, or one of my favourites. A Revenant forms from the soul of a mortal who met a cruel and undeserving fate. It claws its way back into the world to seek revenge against the one who wronged it. The Revenant reclaims its mortal body and superficially resembles a zombie. However, instead of a lifeless eyes, a Revenant's eyes brim with the resolve and flair in the presence of its adversary. If the Revenant's original body was destroyed, or it's otherwise unavailable, the spirit of the Revenant enters another humanoid corpse. Regardless of the body the Revenant uses as a vessel, its adversary always recognizes the Revenant for what it truly is. So it follows a kind of an age-old theme of the angry spirit, although this one it possesses
Hmm.
a dead body as well as its tool of vengeance. They're good, middling difficulty, challenge rating 5, 136 HP as the set number, but if you want to roll it, it can still go quite a bit higher, 16d8 plus 64. Normal movement, pretty low armor class. They've got a lot of HP, but they're kind of easy to hit because they are still just zombies, kind of. Superpowered zombies with a
Evolved
mind of their own.
zombies.
Yeah, angry AF zombies. Armor class 13. pretty good stats across the board, except for intelligence being a little low, and very standard resistances and immunities that would fit a lot of undead sort of things. So resistance to necrotic and resistance to psychic as well, as we've already discussed. That's quite rare.
It is quite rare,
Um, immune to poison damage.
of course.
Condition immunities: charmed, exhausted, frightened, paralyzed, poisoned, and stunned. Um, dark vision 60 feet. A lot of other nice rules. So it
Hmm.
regenerates 10 hit points at the start of its turn, unless it takes fire or radiant damage. You tend to find the regeneration ability typically has something that turns it
Yeah.
off, like fire or radiant damage. Um, it rejuvenates, and this is why I like it. It keeps coming back when you kill it.
Hmm.
The Revenant's body is destroyed, its soul lingers. After 24 hours, the soul inhabits and animates another humanoid corpse on the same plane of existence, regains all its hit points, while the soul is bodiless. A wish spell, again, we've talked about how rare those are, can be used to force the soul to go to the afterlife and not return. Uh, yeah, so it's a good persistent bad guy, especially if you have a group of players that are a little chaotic. Maybe they kill an
Hmm.
NPC that didn't really deserve it,
I mean, I'm gonna
or is
say
like,
we have fought it, and it deserved to die.
oh, I'm not. That wasn't a comment on the Revenant
I
Efreeti,
know, but
guys.
still,
Uh,
it deserved. He deserved to die, and
he
we killed
died,
him.
but he was a very angry person, uh,
Hmm. Was he a?
overflowing with hatred.
Was he? Is he from the book? Is it a spoiler to talk about? Is that a thing that should happen to him, or is that something you
No,
invented?
it's not. It's not. So the reason I did what I did is, funnily enough, if James is watching, I know he's used Revenants this way, or at least in a similar way.
Hmm.
On the random encounter chart, you can, if on on Curse of Strahd, if you get a random encounter, and I think if it's through the day, I might be wrong. It might have to be nighttime. But one of the worst ones you can roll on a 20 is a Revenant. So even if you set foot in Barovia as a set of level ones, a Revenant can turn up. But I didn't like that because that takes the story out of the Revenant.
Hmm. Which is a big
Like,
part of it. It's.
yeah. So I wanted, I didn't, I would never have used that until you guys had a chance to create the Revenant. So when you killed the NPC that you killed, one of
Hmm.
Strahd's minions,
Hmm.
a rather hateful and angry minion, um, he was always going to want to seek vengeance. So it was a good opportunity, and the Revenant has a lot of useful tricks at its disposal. So it comes back when you kill it, unless you've got a wish spell handy. It's immune to turn undead, which is something clerics and paladins can do. It's got an ability called the Vengeful Tracker. The
Yes.
Revenant knows the distance to and the direction of any creature for which it seeks vengeance. So it always knows which direction to walk in. Even if the creature and the Revenant are on different planes of existence, if the creature is being tracked by the Revenant dies, the Revenant knows. It might still come after the rest of the party until its time is up,
Hmm.
but it will know if it's lost its chance for revenge. That might even give it a new target to seek revenge on, because if it's been denied vengeance,
Hmm.
I mean, if you're an angry spirit, you're only going to
Yeah.
get more angry.
So I think Revenants have a year, don't they? For Hunger for
Yes,
Revenge, a
they do.
Revenant only has 1 year to exact revenge. Which you
They
think,
do, yeah.
oh, that's not great. That's not that long. Having been pursued by one of these, I can assure you, it's far too long.
Bearing in mind that even if you play D&D once a week, typically in a session, you wouldn't have, unless you were fast forwarding time,
Hmm.
you wouldn't have more than a couple of days. So let's just assume you have on average 1 to 2 days per session. That's still going to take you 3 to 4 sessions. If you're having them weekly, that's 3 to 4 weeks to have a week in D&D world. which means that you're going to have to times that by 52 to get. So that's potentially around 52 months of weekly sessions to get rid of this.
Maybe you'll actually have the wish spell required to get rid of him by that point.
I think for the entire year that we played Strad for probably just under a year.
Mhm.
For the entire we didn't miss many sessions. We were a pretty good group for that.
It was
We're a pretty
consistent.
consistent
Yeah.
group. Um, and I think in game there was maybe a month, maybe a month and a half.
Yeah, there wasn't. I think you'd be, yeah, maybe a month.
I
Like,
might even be generous when I'm saying it. I think it's probably around a month at most.
yeah.
So that took us a year to get through. So 12 years of playing D&D every week to get rid of a revenant. Yeah, you're gonna have the wish spell by that point, and if you
Oh
don't, you're
yes.
doing
Oh yes.
it
You either
wrong.
have it or you're gonna find a way to get it.
Yeah.
Um.
Uh, what you guys did was found a way to contain it,
Mhm.
but in the background, while you weren't there, I was still working on ways for it to
Mhm.
escape its confinement, or at least basically kill its own body trying to escape so that its spirit could get somewhere.
Like, he's gonna
But
be
let's talk
so
about
angry. He's gonna be so angry.
yeah, yeah, he's still there. Um, let's talk about its attacks.
Mhm.
It'll hit you with its fists. It makes two fist attacks, +7 to hit, so it's pretty accurate. 5 foot reach. It does 2d6 +4 bludgeoning damage, so it's kind of like it hits you with a great sword or a maul, rather than a great sword, I suppose, with it being bludgeoning. If the target is the creature for which the Revenant has sworn vengeance, the target takes an extra 4d6 bludgeoning damage. Instead of dealing damage, the Revenant can grapple the target, provided the target is large or smaller. So you do see that with quite a few undead, like vampires and things, can also grapple. Um, the Vengeful Glare. I liked this ability when I was using it. The Revenant targets one creature it can see within 30 feet of it, and of which it has sworn vengeance. The target must make a DC 15 Wisdom saving throw. On a failure, the target is paralyzed until the Revenant deals damage to it, or until the end of the Revenant's next turn. When the paralysis ends, the target is frightened of the Revenant for 1 minute, which is likely to be at more than the length of the fight. The frightened target can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, with disadvantage if it can see the Revenant, ending the frightened condition on itself as a success. So yeah, it's if you paralyze a target and you hit it with melee attacks, you automatically crit it.
Mhm.
So the idea is the Revenant is going to give its target its Swan Vengeance to a really angry, mean stare, and then go and beat the shit out of it. They hit hard, and I think his vengeance target was it Woody, the ranger?
I
Because
believe so. It was
I think
Woody
he got the kill.
and other named NPC.
Oh yes, it was because Woody was wielding the sword that I gave you, which was the NPC's weapon. Which
Yes.
that was a little bit of homebrew, but I decided because it was also bringing it brimming with the hatred of this past NPC that it would always have a link against whoever used that sword. But to be honest, I did that purely because it was the NPC that uh, that was in the fight that
Hmm.
uh, ended up killing Rahadin, which became the Revenant. So I didn't want to just have a Revenant that was angry at an NPC. I wanted
No,
it to
yeah,
impact the
I
group.
completely understand that.
So
Um,
I gave it that effect as well, knowing full well that somebody would use the sword. But yeah, they're a really good thing, full of flavour. Um, they're a good kind of early to mid repeating boss. If you're not running something like Strad and you still want something to keep coming up and fighting your party,
mhm.
um, really useful. If you are running something like Strad and you don't feel like using Strad every time, then something like this can
Mhm.
also
Good.
be a thing that's chasing them. It could have been manipulated into a position where that person might have died. That Strahd could have manipulated that event
Hmm.
to happen, thus
Hmm.
creating a revenant that produced the party for him, because that's something he would find entertaining.
Oh yes,
As
as what
Yeah,
Strada wants
he
to
knew
do.
about the situation. He didn't engineer it. It just happened. He would have
Well,
rather
he was always
his servant
watching. He was always watching.
alive. He was. He's
Big
always watching.
pervert is what Strados is, I guess. Yeah, I like Revenants. I've wanted to use a Revenant for like a long time. I never really got the opportunity to do it because it does feel very specific. You do want it to target your players rather than. I mean, you can have a story where it targets an NPC and it's a whole about trying to stop this thing before it kills. It's whatever, right? But I've always I like I like that little thing, and I think there's a couple of monsters that do it where instead of dealing damage, they can grapple.
Yeah,
And I like that. I think it's interesting because, like, I think is it vampires can do that as well, or something like that.
vampires do it,
Yeah.
or even the vampire spawns can do it because the idea is they can come in for the bite
Hmm.
with the next attack. Mind flayers don't have to not do damage. They just grapple you as part of
Yes.
the
Yeah.
tentacle
There are
attack.
some that do
Um,
that with tentacle attacks, or
yeah,
is it pseudopods for some as well? I don't.
or
The,
yeah,
the
like the mimics and what have
the
you.
oozes and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, a
But
lot
I
of
like it. It's a good alternate option because some of the best things is just to grapple your target so they can't get away. Obviously, if you want to
I think
change little things with something around the Revenant, you can give him a weapon instead of a fist attack. Maybe even
you
up the
could.
damage a bit if you're looking to make him a bit more difficult. Obviously, as Rob said before, hit points can easily be increased. His roll, you just go with a higher number within the range or whatever you particularly want.
You could
Um,
even add flavor, different, like Dan just said, weapons,
mhm,
maybe even abilities. If you kill the original Revenant's body and the spirit goes into the corpse of something that was more powerful,
mhm,
or a body that was a master of a swordsman, and then could take on some of those skills because it's muscle memory rather than remembered skills as well. So it gains some of that stuff. I think that's a cool idea.
mhm. Yeah, I also quite like that. It is something you could use theoretically to with your own players because I have seen it done. Spoilers for Critical Role Campaign 1. They did it. There was a player in that campaign who died and came back as a revenant, and the whole vengeful tracker thing is an interesting addition for a player. It basically allows you to track your enemy, your nemesis, and it was. I think it was really good for them in that particular campaign. I since I saw that I was like, what is a revenant? Because I just remember seeing chat going, "Is he a revenant? Is he a revenant? Is he a revenant? Blah blah blah. Revenant, revenant, revenant." And I was like, "What is a revenant?" I looked at it and went, "I want to use this some point." Um, so maybe I will. Maybe I'll get
I figure
opportunity.
that's not been in the animated show yet then.
No, no, that'll be seasons away. That's
Fair.
Vecna's storyline.
Fair, fair.
So in game,
Well,
so
you can give me the full spoilers later because
I shall.
I've not seen campaign one. But we won't talk too much about the Critical Role spoilers on the podcast.
Yes, we
But
shan't.
yes,
But yeah,
Re-
it's a great enemy. Gotta try and use it at some point. Maybe I'll do it in the current campaign if I can wrangle it, because there's room for it. I think in definitely in Fitz's world. So with
yeah,
the reborn warlock, undead warlock, definitely room for it there. That I'd love to be able to do it because Revenants seems so much
I can
fun.
think of so many cool things that you could tell
Oh
a
yeah,
character fits to do with regards to revenants or similar. Spoiler alert: my next favorite monster of the week is going to be similar to a revenant,
okay.
and you'll see why if you tune in next week.
I spent a long
But
time looking at undead things. I'm trying to think what it could be, and there's a few. But we'll move on from from our Revenant boy to my monster of the week. My monster of the week is something I've used before because that's what I kind of wanted to do this week was go for something that I've used before, that I have experience with, and I didn't want to use something that is like a 20 plus challenge rating as I have a tendency apparently to do, likely because some of the coolest monsters are the really high challenge rating
There you
ones. So this week I decided to go with the Efreeti, or Freet if you prefer to say without the I. I kind of prefer it without the I, but I know it says Efreeti in the stat block, but I like Efreet. Sounds right
Or if you
somehow.
play Final Fantasy, Ifrit.
Yeah. Um, it is a large elemental basically. It's a form of genie. So you've got the four main genie types. You got your fire one, your earth one, your water one, and your air one. This is the fire one. It also is, generally speaking, lawful evil, which I also quite like, and it kind of looks like a devil and a demon, and I may have a fondness for devils, but it isn't actually a devil. It is a elemental. It is a genie, I guess. There is something called a jinn, isn't or genie in D&D, so not to get confused. Um,
Yes.
It's got a decent armor class. It's got some natural armor, which is always a great thing. Which is really easy to
Oh, yeah.
give if you're ever going to do a homebrew monster. You can just go, I think it has pretty tough skin. I'm going to give it a good armor class.
Yeah.
Or it's particularly quick. You might decide to do that as well. Stacks of hit points. I mean, we're looking at a challenge rating of 11, so it's going to have lots of hit points, and more importantly, it flies,
60
which
feet fly.
it does have
Very
60
nice.
feet fly, which is quite common fly speed, but it also has a 40-foot walk speed. But if you got a 60-foot fly speed, why are you going to be walking? Unless you want to do some sort of like dramatic walking through the fire and the flames to uh, to reveal
Sephiroth.
itself. Um, has three sets of saving throws, which I didn't realize, which is
Oh, yeah.
even greater. And of course, it has a fire immunity, because a fire elemental should realistically be immune to fire. But what you will notice is no poison immunity. Interesting.
Oh,
Which
wow.
a lot of monsters do have when you start, especially get into these sort of level monsters. No poison immunity.
I wonder if that is the case. I've never actually noticed that. I wonder if all the elementals can be poisoned.
I bet Earth or
Interesting.
Earth, well, the Earth ones probably maybe not thematic, or even
Yeah,
maybe the water ones as well. Not gonna look it up because we will save those monsters for another day, for another
we
podcast.
will. We will.
It's got dark vision, 120 feet, which beats the Revenant with his mere 60 feet he had. So it's got 120 feet, but it is again a thing of fire. So light is its thing. It speaks Ignan, which is one of the primordial languages of the. It's the one of the fire plane. Obvious because it's
And
called
only
Ignan.
ignorant,
And
apparently.
only Ignan. I have allowed it to speak other things because how
Well,
do you
it can
communicate
cast
with a
tongues.
party if unless they speak primordial, they're not going to understand?
It does have the spell tongues, I suppose.
It does. I just let it speak common. Like,
I
like
would just let. Typically, I would let most things of intelligence speak common.
um, so yeah, if it's got that whole it's got elemental demise. I mean, it just means its body doesn't stick around. Just what it just leaves its equipment, which you guys are awfully familiar with. Perhaps I read that. I really like that. And it obviously has its innate spellcasting with things like tongues, enlarge and reduce. It can do 3 days each, 3 times a day each, however you want to
Yep.
phrase it. It's got detect magic at will, which is great because can't hide your magical stuff from these bad boys. And then it's got the once a day of conjure elemental, but only fire elementals,
Yep.
gaseous form, invisibility, major image, plane shift, and wall of fire. I really liked when monsters have plane shift because it explains how the hell they got to the material plane in the first place.
That it does, yeah.
Also allows them to retreat if necessary.
Just the Homer Simpson backing into the hedge.
Yeah.
Bye. Only
Bye.
this case the hedge sets on fire.
It's also it does two scimitar attacks, or it uses its hurl flame attack, which is kind of just like produce flame and then chuck it, right? It hurls flames for 5d6 damage as a ranged spell attack.
Which isn't bad at all.
Now, when I played it, I also gave him quite a nice sword to up him a little bit, because why not? Because it's fun. Again, we talked about with Revenant, you can change a monster's weapon quite easily. Just change its damage type to whatever the relevant weapon is. And a lot of time you're changing the damage dice as well, so you can adjust that. But I still had it was still a. I thought, well, I gave you a scimitar. I imagine it was a two-handed scimitar. I think we used longsword stats. I think is what we ended up using.
Oh,
Um,
I thought we used the big scimitar, which is like 2d4 or
there
something.
is the double-edged scimitar or something, which I
Yeah.
think is supposed to be like a scimitar with two blades.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah, yeah. Whereas I was like, it's because he's large, so anything he wields an Efreeti, anything Efreeti's gonna use is gonna be bigger, and you guys are not as big as it, so you'd be like dragging around this ridiculous sword. So I thought,
Yeah.
just make it a bigger sword anyway, and it's magic, so it can adjust to your size, kind of Lord of the Rings and the Rings style stuff. It kind of adjusts size, it changes size in it. Um,
Yeah.
But one thing I also quite like about these things, also being lawful evil, is that they have in there, if you want to read there a little bit their lore, is that they're slavers. I don't mean I like
Oh,
slavery, so that's probably the really wrong way to put that. But I it gives them great motivation. Is that the city of Brass is a city of slaves basically, which is where they're from, and they like to go out and look for those to bring back to work the forges or work the forges of the Azir fire dwarves. Basically,
I do like those.
they're
Yeah.
also pretty cool. But yes, I like these guys, and as you know, I used them against you guys. To one of my favorite fights was in that cavern where they had the portal, so the elemental fire
Yeah.
plane was leaking into the material plane, and it was heating uh, essentially hot springs, making them hot
Yeah.
springs.
It was a good
And
fight.
and he came through, and I got to use Wall of Fire, which was great. Separate a party with Wall of Fire. It
Yeah,
was
that
great.
was. I think that was pretty much the fight where I decided as Narakis, because before that I used a maul a lot, and I'd found it very hard to get to this guy. And we were level 6 or 7 at that point, I think. No, I think we might have been level 5 or 6, and I was close to getting the Artificer's infusion that gives you the repeating ammo on a
Hmm.
crossbow. So I was like, actually, this would be much less of a pain in the ass if I could just shoot this guy. So
Oh
that
yeah.
was the inspiration for him switching to crossbow.
I'll say when I had him, he had a few little extra things that I was allowing. Like I allowed him to basically misty step as long as it was onto a burning fiery surface. He could move around it. It would just
Yeah,
give him that bit of mobility and to allow the what would you call them mobs? I guess the lesser
minion
elementals, the
mobs.
minions,
Yeah.
to
I mean,
engage in the fight a bit more.
they still have a 60-foot flying range. So even if you hadn't have let him do that misty step, s- uh, flaming ground step, I'll call it, that you let
Yeah.
him have, he'd have still been incredibly mobile.
Hmm.
Yeah,
He just doesn't have to
with a
worry
nice
about
speed.
opportunity attacks,
That's true. That's true.
which can be a bit of a pain in the ass, which can pin down your monsters very easily if they're aware of such a thing. That is, of course, because I'd experienced it because I believe we did that fight after we fought Sorad, the diva, the angel.
No.
Was it the other way around?
It was the other way around because Sorad cured Berenger of the curse of this sword.
He did. There was a fight that was like you pinned down. You would just pin. People couldn't move. You just hit him because they couldn't move. You definitely did. You definitely did. It was so bad, but I wouldn't have adjusted him otherwise. Must have been a
Maybe it was
fancy
the
one.
big chicken.
Maybe. Big Chicken was fun though. I didn't have too much trouble
Yeah,
just knocking you guys back. But it might have been the big. It might have been the Big Chicken.
I can't
Yeah,
remember
it
what
could have
else.
been. It could even have been the ambush on the road. To be honest, because I had two.
Yeah,
I had
maybe.
two guys that were based on trolls that you guys killed real quick.
Yeah, that was a bit of a massacre, wasn't it? I remember that.
Hmm.
And I remember Steph's Druid casting Reduce on the horse that
Yeah,
one of them was riding.
yeah. It just becomes a little pygmy horse between his legs. Little
Yeah, yeah.
pony. That was funny. I
It
remember that.
remind. I don't know if that was not that either you or Steph would have played Elden Ring, but I can't remember if Elden Ring came out before or after that because it
Oh,
very
a bit
much
after that, I
reminds me of it.
think.
There's a boss that basically is this huge grotesque um, guy whose feet have rotted away, and he rides round on his normal-sized horse. So he looks like it looks like a giant riding a tiny horse, and he's like he uses gravity magic so that he doesn't crush this skeletal. It's not a skeleton horse, but it's so skinny it looks
Mm.
skeletal. Um, Poor thing. If Peter had seen that, there'd have been riots.
I mean, they're always annoyed about something, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, it made me think. When I think of that, I think of that fight as well. So it makes me chuckle.
Yeah. Well, we've talked enough about this particular form of a genie and his rosy red skin and spiky horned head. So he's gonna disappear off my screen. Hey! And we shall move on to the topic at hand, which I don't really think we have. I think in shorthand in our little chat, Discord chat, I've just started referring to it as idiots. At least I did today, anyway, as a
Yeah.
topic.
I originally suggested this as a topic because um, it's almost a mean way of saying it, but we mean it with as much love as possible.
It's
Why
endearment.
it's good to have, yes, endearment. Why it's good to have an idiot in your group, and what I really mean by that when I suggested it as a topic is why it's good to have somebody that makes choices that you maybe wouldn't have made if you were being strategic or
Yes.
tactical or
So it's
or
essentially where it's people who think differently than you do. And their
yes, yeah.
brains work differently, or what was it you phrased it last week? Something to do with unusual brain chemistry or something.
Cerebral anomalies
Yeah.
in the nicest possible way.
Oh yeah.
It's people,
Yeah.
yeah, that make strange connections. If you're a DM, you'll typically have someone that thinks differently to you in your party. Will approach puzzles in a very different way than you think about when you're making puzzles. But it's not just for puzzles. It can be anything. We joke about the player in our Curse of Strahd campaign, Stephen, who played Goldie,
Mm,
who made a really suicidal attack on Strahd really early on
mm.
because he just decided that he was going to act with complete aggression against Strahd as soon as he
He
met him.
he was a servant of Kelmvor, right? So
He was, yeah. You could say that he role played that
to
in
an
kind of
extreme.
almost a typical lawful stupid mentality. Um, he started a fight, but in all honesty, if we break down that fight, which I think would take probably longer than the time we have left for the stream, but like that, what you would think of as a silly thing to do because it caused his character's death. It also caused the character death of Felicity.
Mhm.
but it created a really good narrative. Strad really took offence at the arrogance of the affront to the attack on him like that. You didn't let him finish his monologue. He showed up just to have some monologue, just to berate and bully you guys a bit and gaslight you and threaten you and
Of course, of
do all the
course.
things. Under, as Rob, I understand why he was attacked. Look, I do, but Strad's going to retaliate. So, as pardon me, can't get my words out today. But as soon as that attack happened, Goldie's fate was sealed.
Hmm.
He could not go unpunished for that. But then the way you guys played the fight out, some of you just run. You took the NPC that you were accompanying and you ran for the hills. There was also some children NPCs involved that Felicity tried to save. Those children NPCs ended up getting abducted, which led to some really good narrative moments, which ended in Steph in tears, which was beautiful.
Chef's
Um,
kiss.
yeah, later, that was one of my favourite moments. That
Oh,
moment on the beach,
it was great.
um, and the other moment later with young Freak. um, but just that none of that was in the book because the interactions with Strad you can't write in a book. That has to come from the DM and the players
Mm.
interacting. So that
Collaborative storytelling.
exactly that silly action that yes got Goldie killed and turned into a vampire spawn meant that Felicity was allowed to become a Dampier because I spoke to Steph out of the game and said, would you like to roll up a new character? Or if you like, you could be a Dampier
Hmm.
because I had plans, which I won't go into because those might be spoilers.
Hmm.
Um, but so there was a good narrative reason then to drive for her to have drive to go to a certain location in the world. Um, it then meant that Strad had abducted two children and could use them as a bargaining chip, or just to torment you, or to do other things. And it really impacted every interaction you
It
had
did.
with Strad from then on. So it's not a bad thing for sometimes for your players to act like idiots.
It is not, because consequences are fun. Like, if how boring would it be if everything was just as predictable as you thought it would be? Like, you want something to be different and chaotic and bring that different energy because everybody thinks the same. Boring. It's boring, and not. And I think we're quite lucky in that. I don't. How do you put it in a really nice way? Our current group, I would say, is full of idiots, and everybody kind of thinks slightly differently.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
we do.
like when okay, it's maybe like 6 weeks before my brother's comes back in and will be joining our current new campaign for a while. He's more similarly minded to myself or to you, so that will change the dynamic. But at the moment, I like that everybody's kind of thinks a bit different,
We do.
and
I
it,
think
it
as well.
works.
um, One of the other reasons that I added it as a talking topic, is think of some of the times, some of the other things that um, Stephen did with his other characters.
Hmm.
Uh, it made such memorable
Oh, it
moments.
does, man. It does. So it's some of the best moments. Some of the best moments come from those things. Yeah, without a doubt.
That fight with the Jin that we were just talking about, I know you'll have been thinking about the moment that he walked up to that pool of boiling water that was
Yeah.
next to the lava and just stuck his hands in it. That you had audibly described
Yeah.
that it was bubbling with heat and boiling hot and very clearly steaming.
Hmm.
So nobody in their right mind really should go up and put their hands in that. Yet he had decided, instead of asking and said, "Oh, Dan, can my character see if there is a water elemental in that water? Is there any way I can discern that?" He decided himself that his character would just go and dip his fingers in the hot water
Low
Let's see if he
intelligence
can
character
like.
though, so kind of right to do it. He was good, and it makes memorable moments. And I think about that because I think it could have been kind of cool if there was something boiling in that water and he'd gone over and discovered it. I just didn't think about it at the time because you're running a whole different encounter. But that's like, oh, maybe in future I could do something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It's one of those where it almost like points out something that you as a DM have missed.
Hmm.
And you can see then you're thinking, oh, actually, yeah, I could have put a water elemental in there. That'd have been cool. But or as the players enter a town and you describe it as having female guards only,
Hmm.
because it's a town that has a strange system of all the women are guards and all the men go and work in the mines.
Yeah, the mines are far away, so the men got to leave.
And
So
we
the town is
arrive,
just all it seems to be all women.
and as we arrive, while all the men are out at the mines, the player asks. I love that when you look back at it, you can see the mental trajectory his thoughts have taken, but he's jumped straight to the end and said, instead of saying like it's a little bit weird that they're all women, can I figure anything out based on that? Have we seen any men at all? He just went, are any of them pregnant?
And you could see the logic, you could see the connections he's gone in his head. Yeah, great memorable moment. I even think that I said we want to switch away from Stephen, for example. We can go to like uh when we were in the city of Stillfort, right?
Mm.
And I created a whole NPC encounter that was gonna do some pretty evil twist at the end of it all. But Marius, if you recall Marius, the
Yeah, yeah,
which ended up just being more of a prank on Rob than it was on Luke, my brother. Um,
explain.
but the whole thing was like I made it thinking that this would be the perfect thing because I think I know how Luke's mind works. I know on this, and you think he's gonna love this, he's gonna go for this. Instead, he was kind of in that moment the idiot who decided like, no, I don't like elves. I'm like, you are an elf, but no, don't like elves. I'm
They
like,
always want something.
I didn't
That was
see
his
that.
answer, wasn't it?
Yeah, they always want something. Yeah, and I was just like, oh, okay, that was a really fun kind of side quest but related thing that I really wanted to. I really quite like the idea of you guys doing. I was kind of disappointed that you wouldn't do it, and then I remember telling you, and you're like, "Oh, we're still quite interested in it, in him, because it was
Yeah.
a clear adventure hook." So it was like, "Oh, we there's there's some interest there." I thought I'm going to target Narakis instead. He'll be my target. I'll pull on
Well,
those heartstrings.
Narcus would have just been happy to help anybody in need, so you obviously exploited that.
I did, I did, because I put him being bullied by thugs, and you
I can't
guys.
remember. Had he hired those thugs? Is that what had
Yeah,
happened?
he basically, yeah,
What a little bastard.
yeah, he
Well,
hired
he
them.
got what was coming to him.
He did in the end. Yeah, he mutated into a horrible thing, and then you guys put him down. That was a great fight too, though, and that
It
was a
was, yeah.
fight where there was some idiocy going on, some sort of thoughts of immediate of like, oh, we're screwed. I don't know what to do. Panic moments.
Yeah. When I was playing Arrakis, I was on the other side of that wall anyway, so I was just like, I'm smiting this little
Yes,
bastard.
yes, you were fighting him where the others were stuck inside essentially a field of anti-magic, and both and they were a sorcerer and a druid. Not great for them.
Yeah, yeah, that was an interesting scenario. Luckily, we took down Marius. That was his name. Took him down pretty
Marius.
quick. Yeah, it was a good fight.
I mean, I did stick. He was stuck with like the two melee characters, so the paladin and the barbarian. And of course, I think you were ranged by that point, so
Yeah,
because you were because I remember the big range thing for Narakis was in the brewery. That was the time that I
yeah,
remember.
which was probably the next biggest fight after the fight with what was his name? Azir?
Who?
The elemental that we fought
Oh,
in the
the
cave.
yeah, yeah, probably. Oh,
No,
what was his
not
name?
Asia. That's the monster. It was something like that though.
It was. I went for something Arabic sounding.
Azit or something like that.
Yeah, Azid.
Ah,
Something like this.
Azid, that was it.
He had
Yeah.
a he had a whole long name that he liked to big himself up. He wasn't
Yes,
that.
he
He
did.
actually wasn't supposed to be that important in the whole like hierarchy of Efreeti. He just liked to big himself up.
Well, they are quite chaotic. Well, no, they're not. They're lawful, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
But yes,
but what's
and I
that?
can think of many other examples of. Um, I don't want to say player idiocy again, idiocy, because
It
it
sounds demeaning, but we're not.
does sound mean. But in my Monday group, we have a wizard that goes by the name of Darwin. Very talented wizard, has some very powerful spells
Hmm.
because we are playing at quite high level. He's a necromancy wizard. He has used necromancy very well. He also has some nice magic items that are homebrew that buff his undead. But I think Milton won't mind me saying this. He gets ideas in his head sometimes. He gets a
Hmm.
fancy to try something. Um, I don't know. I don't know what Milton whether you see things online or whether you just see a spell and see an interaction and you just really want to do it. He got obsessed with the catapult spell for a little while, so he went and bought a load of nets. He went and bought bottles of acid and other kind of contract, like
Nets
other
do suck
bottles of
on their
things.
own. Like nets
Yes,
just
they
suck
do.
on their own. So,
Look, it wasn't a bad idea, but we were going against like a bear law,
all right, okay.
and then we went against a really powered up. It was like a what is it? No, not a white. A dread knight maybe the one that's like an undead paladin.
Hmm.
Um,
That's Hell Knights, but that's not what you mean. That's
the
they've
one
got
that's got
another
like
thing.
a big crown helmet.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, it's like
Death
it was like
Knight?
a say again.
Death Knight?
Death Knight, yeah, but like a buffed version of that.
Hmm.
For like that's what we fought after the Bear Law, and those were tough fights. Made a little tougher by the wizard trying to pin them down with catapult-driven netting and stuff like that. Now,
That
those
sounds
that
funny.
would have it was funny. It was look, I didn't. It's not that I didn't like it. It meant that Arthur, my warlock, was definitely the driving force in terms of DPS or damage per
Hmm.
second output or damage per turn output. Um, and those ideas would have been phenomenal against some smaller enemies.
Hmm.
When I say smaller, I don't necessarily mean in size. I mean just like weaker enemies, I suppose I should say, or like groups of enemies or things like that. Um, because the guy had things like psychic lance available to him,
Hmm. But
and
net.
he could,
Fire net.
and he had some great necromancy spells and some other fantastic combat spells. But he had an itch and he had to scratch it, and it
Don't
made a
blame him.
memorable fight.
I do not blame it. I took a net as with my Rune Knight, oh big a lud, big orc, and I used it once, and I don't think I've ever used it again because it's
Yeah,
just the rules for nets. They're a special weapon, and they have some, and it just horrible things.
that
But
is definitely going to be a topic of discussion at a later date that I was going to mention to you the other day because I
hmm,
know how easy it is to get you to rant about how bad spears are.
yes, don't get me started on spears, bro. Spears.
The best martial weapon in real life is
Yeah,
always noted as the spear, but no.
we'll stick to this. We'll stick. Yeah, we don't need to talk about my idiocy. Let's talk about other types of idiocy.
Oh, have there been any? We've not had any real moments of silliness or idiocy in our recent stuff, really, have we?
It
I
depends
don't
on what
think
you
anything really
mean and how
happened in.
how mean you want to be, I suppose. Um, I learned that the character whose backstory involves a lot of B&E and burglary doesn't have proficiency with thieves tools.
Yeah. Or proficiency in stealth.
So I'm curious. I'm curious to how he came to the ideas that he did. Could turn out to be really cool. We'll see how it goes. But we're only what we've
Yeah,
played two games, session
two
zero of
sessions.
two games, and then tomorrow will be our third game.
Yeah, I'm looking
Um,
forward to it. It's going to be good.
yeah, but I don't. Yeah, we've had limited. I mean, we've had idiocy because people like to make jokes, and we're enjoying that.
Yeah.
And we've invented things the brothino, like where you tell me that was a smart thing.
Yeah, I suppose that's something that it's almost an offshoot from why it's good to have idiot players, but
Mm.
why it's good to have people that don't mind just joking around in the
Yeah,
sessions.
it's when you go right. Well, it's kind of a casino, but it's also got a bit of it's a brothel really as well. And someone's bright brain, the way people think, just put two and two together and go brothino.
Yep.
Like I can't say that's too different from you, to be honest. You, it's definitely something you would say. Um,
I'm surprised I didn't say it.
I know it was Joe who said it, so
Yeah.
but it is definitely something you would come out with. So yes, that is yeah. You've got to put up with Rob's puns if you play with Rob. So
Yeah.
brings the humor,
Yeah.
it brings the humor, brings the lightheartedness.
I think there are things as well that are like I know you made a short out of it from last week's
Hmm.
episode where I was talking about how your players are always there's always one player that just will dive into that awkward moment of silence. Or there's like a persistent thing that keeps coming back. A really good example of that is something that eventually started to irritate me in Critical Role Season 2 was when
Hmm.
they kept all shouting 9-9. Or I think it was like a Brooklyn Nine-Nine joke at first based on
Nine is what they
Liam's
shout. Yeah.
German accent, and
Mm.
it kind of ended up being why they became the Mighty Nine, and it's kind of a running joke that
Yeah,
he isn't.
because Liam O'Brien plays Caleb who has a German accent, so
Yeah,
nine means no in
yeah,
German, and it's also a number in English. So
yeah. Yeah, I see where it all went. It's just one of those things that's like a running joke. Like one of the ones that happens. I know I do it a lot, but I also know that some of my other players do it a lot because of internet videos. Is whenever anyone says "I'm making my way,"
mm,
just have to finish it with "downtown,
yeah,
walking fast. I'm a seagull. Go fuck yourself." It just has to be done. Like, yeah, you just have to put up with those moments, but they do become memorable and they do stick with you. Um, so it makes good D&D,
yeah. Well,
even if serious moments are sometimes
I definitely
split.
would criticize myself. I can't stand awkward silences. It gets to me, so I will regularly spit out jokes as a means to fill those awkward silences. So I'm definitely someone who has whose brain has to fill those gaps. And it's kind of why it's more fun for me to play a sillier character or a small or someone who a character who just does things, doesn't think about them, because you can just come up with nonsense to do. Well, I so much enjoy playing Lud. Man,
Yeah,
really
because
nice.
he can be silly because
He
he's
can
a
be.
big dummy,
He's a big dummy, exactly. He's a big kid,
dummy
really.
thick.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's definitely dummy. Big boy now, big boy.
yeah, big lad. I think yeah, I think those silly moments is uh, they're always going to be part of every group. I'm reminded now of an Instagram reel that was doing the rounds. I've seen it a couple of times
Hmm.
over the last week, and it is a clip from a live play that I do not recognize. It's not one that I've seen, so I couldn't go like search it, and it wasn't
Mm,
there. It wasn't their page that posted it, so
okay.
I wasn't sure where it came from. But it was the DM was obviously doing a monologue
Hmm.
with with a BBEG style character, I would imagine.
Hmm.
The context was kind of missing for the clip, but
Hmm.
um, he'd made it clear that he knew who they were and that he was able to read their minds. And he said, "Oh, I can easily just pick out your surface thoughts. And one of the players instantly just went, "Oh, he's got detect thoughts up," and then just went, "Dicks, dicks, 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 dicks," and all the other players just went, "Dicks, dicks, big
Yeah,
fat cocks," and like
yeah,
just started taking it, and you saw this moment of irritation in the eyes of the DM, and then he adjusted and got back in character, and it played out well, which is the best way to do it, because obviously you've lost your monologue at that point, but it's a funny moment that will be remembered going forward,
hmm
and you can turn it into it starts a domino effect of how it will, again, going back to that example with Strad, how it will impact other interactions with that BBEG or that NPC, and um, it's just nice, memorable moments.
yeah. And it's a big thing I'm enjoying and going to enjoy more with our current campaign, being that I've built something that is largely just going to be improved from my perspective, and it will just allow that little part of my brain just to just be able to do jokes. And it is a world that's silly because it's higher magic and it's just a bit wild and weird and sort of Pratchett inspired as well. So it's just that kind of quirky, surreal sense of humor. And I think you've got to embrace. I said we said idiots at the beginning of this topic, and we don't mean idiots. We mean like embrace the chaos.
Yeah, yeah,
Don't and the lesson to DMs is like don't get annoyed at your players when they do
yeah.
silly things or they do something or just because they've done something that isn't what you thought or they've said something that interrupted your monologue, as you said. You can just kind of embrace it. It's different if a player's going to interrupt the monologue with "I would like to cast Fireball," and we all know who we're talking about when we talk about that.
You know who you are.
You know who you are. But if some player comes up with some sort of stupid comment because you said something that sounds well, typically the way it works is, in our part at least, something will sound remotely like sexual innuendo and Steph jumps on it. Or you'll look at her and you know she's there. You see it in there, see it in her eye. And I think every party has at least one, if not two of those. Those I definitely know that my brain can go there, even when it's me saying it. Um,
It's funny because there's a moment where someone said something and not everybody's picked up that there's an innuendo there.
mhm.
And I know you're listening, and I know I look right into the camera and I pull a face, and I know you look at me. We always have that kind of moment, and then
Mhm.
I mute myself because I'm laughing. So no, I don't always mute myself.
Some of the best parts now, especially we talked about last week with
Mm,
regards to like unintentional innuendo, especially when you're talking about names of NPCs and stuff like that. Kind of just lean into it now. I
yeah.
literally created Moradin's shaft as a purposeful joke of like it's technically just a mine shaft, but it's hilarious because Moradin is a god and shaft obviously is an innuendo, so it's
Mm.
great. I love it.
It works as a joke. It functions as a real thing. Perfect.
Perfect, exactly.
Yeah, no, well, you know how I like stupid and silly names anyway. You
Oh
know
yes,
how I,
I've played Minecraft with you. Yes, I am well aware. In fact,
I
this podcast is named thanks to your love of silly names.
this is true. Yeah,
That's true.
Dan once came back to his stable to find his horse named Awkwardly Big Toe,
hmm
and it went from there. Friendship blossomed.
Anyway,
Yeah,
I think we don't really have enough time for another topic, and we're almost to the
no,
end. So we will call it a night with the Oculus Big Dice podcast recording on Twitch. If you are not on Twitch, but you would like to watch us live, come over to Twitch. It's twitch.tv// awkwardly big dice. Yes, it's awkward to say. Why it's great. But you come over, you can watch us live. We record on Thursdays at 8 o'clock. That's in BST, currently GMT, once the clock's changed. So British
UK
time,
time.
UK time. We record a live and then it goes up on YouTube on the Friday after I've done a little editing. And then I try to put regular shorts You catch those from some of the better moments from throughout the podcast. We're also available on Instagram, Twitter as well. Check us out on there, and of course, as I said, YouTube, where you can subscribe to us, like our videos. We're looking to continue our growth as we both very
Are we
much
on
enjoy.
Spotify?
We are on Spotify. We're on Apple as well.
Mm,
I get emails occasionally from them, and they're like, "This is so many people have watched." I'm like, "Yeah, we don't have a lot of people watch it, but it's just there so people have it if they want to listen in audio format."
happy
And
days.
Apple's terrible getting any analytics from them. Spotify is far better for that stuff. So I I see you few people who like to listen to us on Spotify. But thank you for listening. We will see you next week on on Twitch for another episode of the Awkwardly Big Dice podcast. So thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
See you later.
Goodbye.